Hi everyone, welcome to this lunchtime CCI webinar. My name is Menekşe Kaya. I am Cluster Manager for Construction Cluster Ireland. Today we are joined by Rosa Coleman and Padraig Doolan to inform you about Enterprise Ireland's Build to Innovate initiative, which is launched under the Irish government's Housing for All plan. Then we will learn about Enterprise Ireland's Agile Innovation Fund to support construction businesses with some examples and case studies. And we will close our session with a Q&A at the end. Lastly, this session will be recorded and shared with registered attendees after the completion of the event. So our first presenter is Rosa Coleman from Enterprise Ireland. He is Department Manager for Construction and Housing, and he is leading the Build to Innovate initiative. Without further ado, I would like to invite Rosa to our virtual stage. Feel free to share your screen, Rosa, please.
Cool. I will take to the stage, as you say, Maneksha. No, look, thanks for the
No worries.
introduction and thanks for joining us today. And I'm more than happy, like we've got a nice number actually. So if people want to put their hands up and ask questions as we go, I'm more than happy to do that and make it kind of as interactive as we can. Just I think it's possible to do that. So yeah, look, Maneksha gave me a good introduction there, and yeah, I suppose to start with, I guess it's important just to talk about the actual background, the core of Enterprise Ireland in the construction world. So my team looks after anything that, from construction products, services, and even some technology. And obviously our traditional focus is around working with those companies to build capability, capacity, product solutions that can ultimately win them export orders. And that will hopefully increase employment and prosperity in Ireland, especially regional, and that's the mandate of Enterprise Ireland and has been for a very long time. And over recent years, you can see there just how successful that has been for us. We've had a huge growth story in particularly in high-tech construction data centers across Northern and Western Europe, and Irish companies have been very successful in that regard. But actually, what I'm here to talk about today is not this traditional work we do. It's a new mandate that Enterprise Ireland has been given, and this is under Housing for All. So you can see there's two things that Enterprise Ireland has been asked to do under Housing for All. The second one there is the Technology Centre, and that has housing as a focus area for its first year. The contract with the host was signed last Thursday actually, and there's going to be a public announcement about that very shortly. But yeah, housing features very centrally in their activity plan for the first year. So the expand agency mandate is the piece that I'm talking about today, and it's great to have Padraig on the line as well, because as you can see there, we've been asked to deliver both innovation and productivity supports. So Padraig is going to be talking about one of the very key innovation supports that we hope will be delivered to this industry at a scale. The objective of our activity here is under the reducing construction cost heading, and the key priority areas for us are those entities that can most impact on the cost of construction. So our thesis is that that's probably home builders, general contractors, offsite manufacturers, but you know, we're working with architects, specialist subcontractors as well on that already. So just to step into the broad context, and this is just a quick reminder of the Housing for All plan. It's 33,000 homes a year average, €4 billion expenditure per annum average across 4 different pathways there that you can see on the screen. One of the problems, I suppose, that the plan acknowledges is that this is already a constrained industry with some real struggles, particularly around labour. And this increase of activity is going to place additional stresses on the industry. So this data here is from a expert group on future skills needs, and they've analysed that there's 40,000 people working in residential construction in Ireland, both directly and indirectly, and that there will be a requirement for an extra 27,000 in the next 3 years, and then up to potentially 80,000 by 2030. So, and you can see the details of the actual skills that they've identified there. So this is a huge ask when you look at it in that stark contrast, really, in terms of what the industry has to deliver. So to talk a little bit about where I think we see the opportunity, and that's a positive glass half full type way of looking at the challenge that's ahead of us. So the actual hard construction costs are demonstrated by the pie chart there, and that's 47% on a 2-bed apartment, or I think it's 48% on a 3-bed house actually. And that's the area that we're going after with this program, is can we support companies with initiatives that will reduce those hard construction costs, and ultimately that may be passed on to purchasers. What we know from both domestic and international studies is that productivity in Irish construction is below European norms actually, and that gross value added figure in the bottom right corner is from the KPMG report that was done with TU Dublin, I think in 2019. And you can see there that Ireland is half that of Belgium. And to me, that is a real opportunity for growth. And when you look back at the previous slide around the labour availability, that labour availability assumption was made based on the same productivity of the industry, but actually that might change with various initiatives and supports and innovations that companies and the sector is undertaking. So when we were given this mandate, I suppose the first thing that we really did was to do a industry consultation process, and we went out and spoke to all sorts of different companies in the sector, companies that we wouldn't have spoken to before, that were domestically focused. And labour came up as the number one constraint in terms of companies' abilities to add dramatically to their current capacity. So from that, we identified a strategy that it hinges off off-site or modern methods construction, but it's not exclusively confined to that. I suppose that's a recognition that if we keep doing the same building methodology as we are now, there's going to be real challenges in terms of that labour capacity and our ability to deliver that number of units. So can modern methods construction decrease that labour requirement, particularly on site, and bring new elements of the labour force into factory settings perhaps? So our funding is in 3 areas around productivity training, new technology tools, and then innovation in off-site manufacturing or site processes is potentially an interesting area as well. And I'm going to talk briefly to 2 examples of this, and then really it's Padraig picks up to speak on the innovation side of it. And I suppose one thing I'd say just when I'm talking about the examples, and I'm conscious that I picked fairly chunky examples in terms of substantial projects that companies could undertake, but actually our offerings are very staged in that they are open to companies that would be only exploring, say, lean or digital at a very early stage. You know, companies that may not have sophisticated systems in place, but they just really need to take their first step on that. And we have supports that help you take that very first step, or we have company supports that are much more elaborate, that can support companies that are really doing quite dramatic, substantial investments in those programs. So the first example is digitalization by a general contractor. And really, this is a company that has taken a multifaceted approach around efficiencies, and there's a number of different strands to that. So they want to increase BIM usage, they want to expand their use of project management software, and one of the benefits that they've seen to date around project management software was the performance and management of subcontractors. So this company, they formerly would have had 2 crews on the road, constantly just going from site to site doing rework, and they estimated that they calculated that cost the business €1 million a year, just supporting those teams on site. As a result of implementation of this system, they've disbanded those teams and they're just doing ad hoc rework on site, and that's because of, I suppose, the effectiveness of managing subcontractors through technology systems like that. The type of support that we use in this, so we have a digital discovery grant, and that's 80% funded, and it's a 9,000 euro grant, all the way up to our digital process innovation. sorry, these have just been rebranded, so I'm struggling over the language, but it's digital process innovation, and that could be up to 150k of grant aid support, and typically that goes against your employees' time if they're undertaking training, but also consultancy. So bespoke software development perhaps to a level, but also consultancy around designing systems, advising you on systems, so on and so forth, is the typical types of supports that we see in this area. And the grant levels are, like I said, 80% for a digital discovery grant, and then training is between 50 to 70% of employees' time, depending on the size of the business. So we think it's generous enough to incentivize people. And then the second example, before we go to Padraig, is around productivity training. And this is an example from a home builder who undertook a time and motion study of their site. So that's people watching people work. And what they found was that the actual time spent working was just 2 hours, 40 minutes of a 10-hour day, which seems kind of incredible. But when you factor in arriving on site, walking around the site, walking to get tools, breaks, all that sort of stuff, it boils down to that. So they did the study, and then they looked at ways of addressing that. So things like induction processes, and that's more and more moving to online apps and so on and so forth that people can do on their phone. But things around the location of tools, that was a big one. So making tools more accessible to workers so that they don't have to walk across the site or figure out where something is. And then down to the availability of food, like bringing food trucks onto the actual site itself. And what they were able to do was add 40 minutes back on their time. So that went up to 3 hours and 20 minutes. And they came across issues in that process. So that was cultural change, and dealing with subcontractors. And often, if a home builder or general contractor is investing in training and it's going into subcontractors, they can feel that they may not be getting the benefit of it as well. So that's an issue. This wasn't a project actually that we funded. This was before our program was launched. But one of our first major projects that we have funded under the initiative is a training around the last planner system for a medium-sized general contractor who's delivering obviously residential. What I'd say just before I hand over to Padraig is that there's terms and conditions that apply to this as well. So we do, for this, we're asking for companies to be over 10 employees. That requirement stays for really all Enterprise Ireland activity. And then you have to be an Irish company, and the projects we're looking for, our return on investment is that it can have some level of impact on the cost of construction. And just before I did see a question pop up there, which is, Richard, do I know which PM software they were using? I do know the answer to that. I'm not totally confident though. So I think it was Procore that they have, but I'm not entirely sure. Yeah, I think it is their expanding Procore. Okay, so with that, I will
Great.
hand to Padraig. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Ross. Yes, great. Especially examples are quite impressive, I would say. Now we will continue with Padraig Doolan's presentation about available grants for supporting construction businesses. Padraig is technical advisor at Enterprise Ireland for Research, Development and Innovation Fund. Padraig, you are very welcome to share your screen when you're ready. I guess you need to swap the screen.
Yeah, I'd like so.
Mhm.
Hi, everybody. Nice to see you all. I hope everyone can.
Perfect. Yeah, we can see now.
So you can see full screen now.
Yes, we
Great.
can.
So thank you, Maneksha, and thanks to everyone who is attending today. And just like to echo what Ross said as well, if anyone's got any questions, just put your hand up, interrupt, or put a question in the chat and we'll deal with that. So I'm here to talk to you today about the Agile Innovation Fund because we feel it has specific utility for Construction Cluster Ireland members. At a top level, the fund is involved in is seeking to develop new or substantially improved product, services, or processes where that total project cost is less than 300k. And I'm going to come back to that in a minute. And some of you may
Sorry,
have.
Parik. Sorry
Yep.
for interrupting. We see a black screen at the moment. Would you
Oh,
mind?
I'm so
Yeah.
sorry. Okay, let me try that again.
Yes, please.
So,
Yes, now we can see.
oh, apologies. I'm not sure what
No
happened there.
worries. Thanks.
This why this all worked fine in the dry run and it didn't work now. So I'll just reiterate that. So The fund is focused on the development of newer, substantially improved products, services, and processes, where that total project cost is less than 300K. And some of the companies here may have worked with an academic partner before for R&D, and this is distinctly different from that. This is where the company themselves are taking charge of the R&D and running with. They can still have an academic collaborator as a consultant partner, but it's really where the company is driving the R&D internally. So we wanted to look at how effective our R&D supports are. We know that your sector in particular is struggling with, the emerging from COVID and probably the impacts of Brexit. And we want you to know that here at Enterprise Ireland, we're very empathetic to that. We're aware of the challenge. But the reality is that by not accessing these supports, you are allowing a significant opportunity to pass you by. So to buttress that, we looked at almost 500 companies that had accessed our supports over the last 10 years, and they're represented by the green bar there. And then we compared them to a group of 714 companies over that same 10-year period that didn't access our R&D supports, and they're represented by the grey bar there. And really, the difference between two groups is striking. Even if we just looked at domestic sales, companies that accessed R&D supports had more than 60% higher domestic sales than companies that didn't. But the big advantage was actually in the export sales. And in one way, that is not a surprise, because an export focus, used to be, and prior to Built to Innovate and Housing for All, it used to be in there for you guys as well. You had to have an export focus. But still, when we looked at the data, companies that were accessing R&D supports had almost 6 times the number of export sales as companies that didn't. You combine those two together, companies that availed of our supports and did R&D had more than tripled the turnover and more than doubled the number of employees in full-time employment. So it's a really substantial opportunity that's available to you. Now, we get 2 different types of applications into the fund. If your R&D idea is a new product or service, then it could be suitable for as an agile project. And the grants for Agile are 45% for a small enterprise, 35% for a medium, and 25% for a large enterprise. So if you're a small enterprise, remember the maximum project cost for an Agile fund is 300K. That's 135,000 that we can hand back to you upon the completion of your project. The eligible costs are the salaries of your staff members, so their time, their FTEs that go into delivering the project. We levy 30% overhead on those salaries. That's effectively money you can spend on whatever you like. We anticipate that you'll have materials costs for prototyping or validation. You can put those in. We also expect that you're likely to identify skills gaps in your team. And if you do, then you can fund that through consultancy. You don't need to be planning to hire somebody just for the execution of the project. You can put in any travel and subsistence costs that you incur as a result of delivering the project. And then finally, if you're in a very, you may well have certification costs at the end of the project, and they're all allowable as well. Now, hopefully you came here today because you've identified a problem that you want to solve, or you have identified a product or service opportunity, and you're wondering if your idea is R&D. Well, typically, an R&D project involves the development of a new product or service, and it'll frequently, usually actually, involve acquisition of new knowledge and skills. And it'll also frequently, although not always, involve prototyping, testing, and validation of those newer improved products or services. An important piece for us is that it can't be just a routine change made to existing products, services, or processes. There has to be a step up in R&D capability of the company. And then finally, the project has to demonstrate some small measure of technical uncertainty and risk. There does need to be a small risk piece in a typical R&D project. Now that's agile projects, but Ross spoke about this in his presentation. Your idea might actually be a new process where you're seeking to make your business more effective or efficient. And if that's the case, then it could be suitable for our digital process innovation offer, DPI offer. An expected outcome here is that you're going to develop a new or substantially improved production or business process. And we see digitalization as a very, very commonplace type of application here. Now, a big advantage of this offer is that the supports are 50% no matter the size of your organization. So if it's a 300K proposal, that's 150K that we can hand back to you, and all the same costs that are eligible for Agile are eligible here again. Now, hopefully I haven't confused things further and you're wondering, well, maybe I'm not sure if my idea is DPI or R&D now. Well, let me talk a little bit about DPI. So digital process innovation covers either process innovation or organizational innovation, or very often a combination of both. So a process innovation proposal will be where you've got a new or significantly improved production or delivery method. So a nice example of that would be, say, where you have a conveyor belt system in your factory. It's got a defined series of steps. You know that process inside out, and you know the number of staff you need to put on that for every batch. You know, if you put in X input, you're going to get Y output, and it's going to be of a particular quality. And you're so familiar with that process, you've come up with a creative new way whereby you can rearrange some of those steps, and maybe by doing so, you drop some of the steps. Perhaps you make the process more efficient, make it faster. Maybe you're improving the quality of the product at the other end, or you could even just be improving workplace safety. And you know that in order to demonstrate that that new process is just as good as or better than your old process, you're going to have to do some trial batch runs. You're going to have to consume materials. You're going to have to put staff on those. And then you may well have certification costs at the end to show that the output of your new process is just as good as or even better than the output of the old process. That's a lovely process and innovation proposal right there. And organizational innovation, then, that's where you're seeking to implement a new organizational method into your business practices, your workplace organization, or maybe even your external relations. And we see digitalization coming in a lot here. So let's say, for example, you have a paper-based method in your company, and it's, let's say, to do with staff resourcing for argument's sake, and it's error prone, and when it's labor intensive, and when there are errors, that impacts on staffing resources, which then has a negative impact on outputs from the company. And you've identified that a new digital solution will solve all of those problems. And you don't even need to develop the digital solution yourself. What you can take an off-the-shelf product once it needs significant customization and further development in order to fit it into your business practices. That's a really, really nice organizational innovation proposal right there. So hopefully at this point you've got a good steer now from Ross on the eligibility criteria for Build to Innovate. You've got an idea now whether your project idea is R&D or DPI, and you're wondering what to do next. Well, hopefully as part of that you've identified your product opportunity or your problem to be solved. And we would always say talk to your development agency if you're a client of EI or your local enterprise office or Rúd Ross na Gaeltacht, or talk to Menexia if you like as manager of the cluster. But even if you're not a client of any of these agencies, you can still apply to us. And what we would always recommend is that you fill out our online proposal document. So that's downloadable from the website, but I'll also make it available to Menexia for circulation after the webinar. That's a 2-page document. It'll take you less than an hour to fill out. You just outline your idea and you send that to us, and we will respond with feedback within 1 to 3 days. If we're all in agreement that you should go forward, we have a 2-step application process. One of them is their online application wizard that just looks for an overview of the company. It gives us a project overview as well of what you propose to do, as well as a detailed breakdown of the costs. And then finally, a 6-segment project plan where you outline the problem, your solution, why it's innovative, where are the risks, the work plan, and who's going to do it. And that's sufficient information for our tech assessors to validate if your project is eligible under state aid regulations, or your costs reasonable, and is there a clear R&D element, that risk piece I spoke about earlier. Just to wrap up shortly, we had 94 applications to the fund last year, represented by the blue bars. 86 of those were successful. So that is a success rate of over 90%. They're represented by the green bar, and almost all of the others are represented by the yellow bar there. We worked with all of those applicants to get those proposals over the line. And that's a key piece here. So with a success rate of over 90%, and I should also mention we're actually undersubscribed. So the reality is if you put together a good proposal around a good idea, you are very, very likely to get this funding once you're eligible under Build to Innovate. A great example of a small Leo Roscommon client was leading designs. Now this is a company that were involved in producing high-end garden rooms, and then they decided to move to more larger structures, and that involved, of course, larger structural engineering challenges, and they developed a range of wide span and multi-story formats, and they also identified, air tightness was an issue. And they worked with us to put together new products on the market. And they're a great example of a small building organization that has successfully utilized the fund in order to deliver new products, new growth, and higher employment numbers for them. And they'll also make this case study available to Mnexia for circulation after the webinar. So just before finishing, I'd like to leave you with bust 3 myths. One is that R&D is only for big multinationals with dedicated R&D teams. The reality is that lots of small businesses, as Lidan Designs just demonstrated, successfully do R&D and do it very, very well. And for example, from talking with Leo with Leo offices, they estimate with between 10 to 20% of their clients are eligible for funding. Also, you may have the second myth is that you have an idea, but you're thinking you don't have any scientists on the team. Well, the reality is, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if this particular group is a great example of that, many businesses do R&D all the time. They just don't think of it in those terms. But if you do identify real skills gaps in your team for execution of the project, you can fund it through consultancy or a new hire through salaries. And then the third myth I'd like to destroy here is that it'll take too much time to submit the application. Agile is named that way for a reason. It's set up for fast, innovative sprints, and we would be seeking to encourage you to apply because it's a much less onerous application process than you probably assume. If you're a client of EI, Leo Rudos, they'll very frequently appoint a business advisor to walk you through the process. We also have downloadable examples available from the website. So it is more straightforward proposal than you think. So that's it from me. All our contact details are there, and as well as the links to the downloadable samples and some more of our case studies. If I can leave you with one thought, is that if you have an R&D idea, please don't sit on it any longer. Talk to your DA, talk to us, and let's get you started on that R&D journey. Thanks for your time.
Brilliant. Many thanks, Padraig. Excuse me. Now we will take some questions from our audience. If you have any questions for Ross or Padraig, please feel free to post in chat box or just step in to ask directly. The stage is yours, guys.
Padraig and Ross, thanks so much. Brilliant presentations, and it's great to see that there's that type of support there, and it's very consistent with what we're doing. It's great to know that there's help available. We'll definitely be in contact with both. We're in the 3D construction printing field, and we are actually in the R&D facility in Drogheda at the moment. We're primarily concerned with optimizing this technology for use in a compliant manner and in an efficient manner. And so far, we've got to a stage where we can reduce costs by about 25% on the traditional methodology that we're looking at replacing, and then also the timeline and projects we've compressed it. But that's what we're basically concerned with. Just Padraig, with regards to the scope of project funding, the 300,000, is that to develop a specific element of a project, or is that the parameter on that? How does that work?
Basically, Justin, it's if you want to put a new product or service on the market, or you want to implement a new streamlined process. So if it's product or service, it's agile. If it's an improvement like making, using 3D printing to, improve something internal within the company, then it's DPI. And the 300K is everything. So to do X, it's going to cost you 300K.
Brilliant. Okay, very good.
Justin, just one of the things, because it's relevant perhaps to a couple of the guys on this call, is okay, so yourself and as a company, you might be looking at doing innovation and be interested in this, but actually your clients adopting your system is potentially an innovation project for them. Okay, so the fact that they're going out and, let's say, there's a very fundamental change in their business processes to use your equipment, right? So that could be a project that we'd support your clients doing. which would ultimately help with what you're trying to do as well.
That's fantastic. That's a great facility for them to adopt, because a lot of people, we're architects ourselves and we didn't really have the headspace. So kind of to know that support is there for them, it's going to help the adoption even more so. So that's a fantastic way of looking at it as well.
Yep.
I just see a question there from Hussam. Are there eligibility criteria around financial brackets turnover team size for the Agile Innovation Fund? So as Ross already pointed out, the eligibility for criteria under Built to Innovate is 10 employees. If you're exporting and you're a Leo client, you can really, there isn't, that's kind of removed. We don't have an eligibility criteria on employees. We do have one on EBITDA status. You do need to be EBITDA positive. That said, there exceptions can be made if your development advisor feels, you know, you've had a rough year, 2 years with COVID, with Brexit, whatever, they can make a case for exception to policy on that as well. But as a guideline, yeah, you do need to be EBITDA positive.
Thank you.
Great. Do we have any more questions from our audience?
Just taking the next steps. We'll just make contact and I suppose begin application as per the details provided, and then just develop it from there.
Yeah, like so, Maneksha, after this call, I will email you the slide deck, the outline proposal template, and the lead on designs case study. And you know, please feel free to circulate that to any of the attendees today or any of the registrants. So, Justin, if you've signed up to receive that from Maneksha, you'll get that 2-page template. Just a Word document, very straightforward.
Brilliant.
You can fill it out, all the details. It'll come back into me, and I'll give you feedback within a couple of days on your idea and what direction we'll go with it.
Okay.
Perfect. Yeah, we'll do that.
And the same with you, Ross. It's the same, similar.
Yeah, well, it's we are directing people in. There's a inbox that we're managing. It's the Built to Innovate inbox, so it's on our website. It's Built to Innovate, and you'll find the contact details there. And if you want to send in whatever you're looking at, and yeah, we're dealing with those sorts of inquiries all the time. So
Thank you so much.
I've got a quick question. Can there be subcontractor costs, and could the subcontractor be international ones such as the Netherlands or somewhere like that, where they do a particular niche area and that expertise needs to be added on?
Absolutely, Vignesh. You can spend up to 50% of the total costs outside the country. And yeah, you know, you can. We would treat them if you subcontractors, they're treated for our purposes as consultants. So you just put them in as consultancy.
That's great. Thank you.
All right. If you don't have any more questions, then this marks the end of our session today. Many thanks, Ross and Padraig, for joining us, delivering these concise and very informative presentation and answering our questions. And also thanks for everyone joining us today. Have a great day. I'll just ask one more time if you have any more questions, but I guess not. We don't have. Thank you very much, then all.
Cool.
Have a great day, everyone.
Thanks all.
Thanks very much.
Everybody.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Nice to meet you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Padraig.